China's seventh census, which was supposed to be released in April, has not yet been released as of May 3rd. Despite the delay in the final report, population data of more than 27 cities were released by local governments, some of which showing a negative natural growth rate. This echoes the rumors of a demographic crisis spawning in China and has generated heated debate among the public. On November 1st, 2020, the 7th National Census was officially launched, and the entire registration process was scheduled to end on December 10th. On December 30th, the National Bureau of Statistics of China announced the completion of the fieldwork. On March 15th this year, Liu Aihua, the press spokesperson of NBSC, said that the 7th National Census had reached the final stage of review and intended to hold a release conference in early April. However, at the press conference on April 16th, Liu made a vague promise that the results would be announced as soon as possible.
给大家提供更多的资料呢，我们这一次的第七次全国人口普查的数据呢，准备在第六次全国人口普查的发布的信息的基础上，增加发布更多更细的信息，力争早日向社会公布人口普查的最终的结果。
It is now early May, and officials have yet to state their position on when the report will be released. We can still find some details from local media. According to 21st Century Business Herald, at least 26 prefecture-level cities have already disclosed their population figures, and 8 of them have seen their natural population growth rates fall below zero, where the natural population stands for the difference between the numbers of births and deaths in a population. Fushun City in northeast China is the worst among the cities that have released this data so far, with a natural population growth rate of negative 13.3%. Shenyang in northeast China is at negative 3.34%, and Weihai in Shandong is at negative 3.05%. In addition, 5 cities in southern China, Jiangsu province, namely Taizhou, Yangzhou, Zhenyang, Changzhou, and Wuxi, all recorded negative natural population growth. In addition to the cities mentioned above, 21st Century Business Herald cites data saying that almost all cities in China will experience population decline from 2020 onwards, not because people have moved to rural areas, but because of a real population decline. A social science expert quoted by 21st Century Business Herald pointed out that some big cities are also gradually entering a negative population growth cycle, which is a major turnaround that has happened silently and may not be felt by many people yet. On April 21st, an article titled An Analysis of the Reasons for the Delay in Rising the 7th Census Data by an anonymous author was published on Boxun News. The article said that the release of the 7th census data was delayed because of a lot of information has to be added. The author commented, the census was conducted using information technology, so technically there should not be a delay, but rather the final results should be available sooner. The only explanation then is that the data from the census reflect the fact that China is facing a big crisis and that officials need time to digest and give explanations. The Financial Times has also quoted informed sources as saying that China will experience its first population decline, with a total population of less than 1.4 billion, and the figure was considered very sensitive and would not be released until multiple government departments has reached a consensus on the data and its implications. China's newborn population peaked in 2017 after the authority relaxed the population control policy in 2016, but soon reduced again. According to the 2019 China Statistical Annual Report, the population of mainland China has grown to 1.4 billion, with 14.65 million births that year, down just from 3.8% from 15.23 million in 2018. However, statistics that year from many local governments in 2019 reflect a population decline of around 10%. It is also worth noting that when China's population exceeded 1.2 billion and 1.3 billion, grand celebrations such as 1.2 billion Population Day and 1.3 billion Population Day were held, but when the population exceeded 1.4 billion, there was no publicity. The 2019 Ministry of Public Security report showed 11.79 million people were born and registered in that year, which is different from the official figure of 14.65 million. The mismatch of data also shows the possibility that Chinese officials may have been involved in falsifying or exaggerating the numbers until the decennial census was made. The Financial Times quoted a Beijing-based government advisor who declined to be identified. It is almost a fact that China has overestimated its birth rate. The challenges brought about by China's demographic shift could be bigger than expected. Such overestimates stemmed in part from the fiscal system's use of population figures to determine budgets, including for education and public security, said the advisor. Back in 2000, the census statistics showed that China's fertility rate was only 1.2 and the number of births was 14.08 million, and it was time to encourage fertility. However, the National Health and Family Planning Commission of the People's Republic of China (NHFPC) claimed at the time that it was impossible to have such a low fertility rate, and that if the fertility planning was relaxed, this number would rise to 2.1, leading to an infinite population expansion, which is not acceptable. Prior to the opening of the full two-child policy in 2016, the NHFPC predicted that 47 million babies would be born each year. In fact, the birth rate in 2016 was much lower than expected, at 1.24, meaning only 12 million babies were born. In 2017, the 19th National Congress of the Communist Party of China convened to consider, among other things, whether the NHFPC should continue to exist. The Birth Control Commission at one point falsely announced that the birth rate was in line with expectations, saying that 18.46 million births would occur in 2018 in order to be kept in the system. In fact, the real numbers only surfaced in 2018 when the NHFPC was abolished, showing that only 13.62 million babies were born that year, far fewer than the 18 million or so the NHFPC had predicted. However, the National Bureau of Statistics of China (NBSC) has always been using the NHFPC's figures for other estimations. As China reformed its household registration system in 2010, many people saw the loophole of buying and selling birth certificates and applying for dual or even multiple accounts in urban and rural areas in order to receive more than 20 social benefits such as preferential housing and medical coverage, resulting in further falsification of population figures. Last year, Yifu Xian, a researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and author of Big Country with an Empty Nest, published his analysis of the 2020 census in Social Science Forum 2020, issue number 6, which has said that China's total population should be 1.26 billion in 2020 instead of 1.4 billion. If the analysis is indeed correct, China will have slipped from the throne of the world's most populous country to India with a population of 1.38 billion. China has been the world's most populous country for the past decade. However, the one-child policy that the Chinese Communist Party pursued since 1979 is now bringing China under a severe aging problem and gender imbalance. China officially relaxed the two-child policy in 2016 and is now relaxing it again, allowing people to have 3 children. However, not only there was no baby boom as expected, but the birth rate dropped to 10.48 per 1,000 in 2019. With a total of 14.65 million births, and this number is expected to drop to less than 11 million by 2030. Meanwhile, China's fertility rate has been lower than Japan's since 2000. At the same time, the elderly population has more than doubled in less than 10 years, with more than 250 million elders over 60 years old in 2019, accounting for 18.1% of the population. It is expected that by 2035, China's elderly population over 60 years old will reach 400 million, accounting for 28% of the population. This is the fastest aging rate of any country in the world at present. Yifu Xian said in his 2020 analysis report that the median age in China in 1980 was only 22, in India it was 20, and in the United States it was 30. But in 2020, the median age in China has increased to 41 to 42, while in the United States it is only 38, and in India it is only 28. In 2035, China's median age will be as high as 49 to 50 years old, while the US will be less than 42 years old and India will be 34 years old. In other words, there will be a 2-generation gap between China and India, he said. He also warned that China's demographic is aging rapidly. The labor force has started to decrease in 2013 and 14, while the United States labor force is expected not to decrease until 2050. Meanwhile, the urbanization that has been driven by the demographic dividend for the past 30 years and the real estate, the core driver of China's economy, are both beginning to hollow out. China's current urbanization rate is at 59.58%, about the same as Japan's in the 1960s. Unlike Japan, where the population structure was very young at that time, with only 7% of the population over the age of 65, China has entered an aging society already, with the elderly accounting for 18% of the population. There's another key question leading to China's demographic crisis. Why do the Chinese stop having children even if the government allows them to have more? In discussion forums and comments on Chinese news, many people say that they can't afford to support their children as the cost of living is getting higher and higher, but wages are not increasing. China has become the world's second largest economy since its reform and opening up in 1979, but its people have not really gotten richer. Instead, the gap between the rich and the poor has grown wider, and no actual official figures have been released since 2010 when it exceeded 0.61. On the other hand, the single adult population in China reached 240 million in 2018, with more than 77 million living alone. 2020 saw only 8.131 million registered marriages, the lowest since 2003, and only 60% of the 2013 peak. China is experiencing its fourth wave of increasing singles, and unlike previous waves, which were due to an increase in divorce, this one is due to a low marriage rate. Beijing has nonetheless attempted to promote marriage and childbearing. Lawmakers in the National People's Congress proposed this year expanding sexual education in schools to encourage pregnancy. Some local governments in China have also proposed programs to help career-oriented women freeze their eggs or match women with men.